Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again from Film Fanatic headquarters. It is Sunday at about 11:23. A nice spring day. We had some crappy weather last night. We had some kind of intense snow. It was kind of weird. I went to some cool events last night in Belfast. I went to go see some live music, and it was really great. And we uh, we bounced back and forth between two shows that were going on, and it was a really good time. But as things were wrapping up and as we were heading out, it was pretty stormy. It was snowing and kind of rainy, but it was actually sticking. We actually got quite a bit of snow, and the roads were not great. I was really surprising. But then woke up this morning and it's pretty much all gone. But yeah, the winter is still got its claws in us. So, but hey, that's uh, that's life. That's life in mid coast Maine during the winter time. So I hope everyone's doing good. So yeah, I want to thank everyone for supporting the channel. People chiming in and checking out these videos, and again, like I always say, I love communicating with other film fanatics. That to me is the greatest part of this channel. And also, there's been a few folks that have been commenting and have made some really great recommendations for some films and directors that are very similar to some of the posts I've put up that I haven't heard of, and that is awesome. And then every now and then someone chimes in and says that they really appreciate that, that there's maybe a handful of films that I've posted some shows on for certain films they've never seen before, and they really are eager to check those out, and they're kind of excited by them. And to me, that's awesome. That's at the end of the day, it's just about the movies, and it's just a journal. It's a personal. I look at this channel as really just being a personal journey or a personal journal on all the movies I love and what they mean to me. That's really it in a nutshell. So, so yeah. So I've said before, like one of my favorite things to do is to go to the movies. That's one of my two favorite things to do when I have the time and when I have the will to do it. My favorite two things to do is to go out and see live music and also go to the movies. I I've been going to see. There's been lots of music and lots of music activities going on this winter, which has been really fabulous and really surprising for being the middle of winter. And I mean now we're in spring mode technically, but we're coming out of the winter time. Just about the next few weeks or so, things will probably start feeling more spring like, but we're still kind of in the winter mode a little bit. But surprisingly, this year and this winter, there's been, I don't know, kind of an explosion, at least here in mid coast Maine, where I live, of so much music going on, so much stuff going on, and it's been I think it's probably been the best winter ever. Well, for me personally, playing shows and playing gigs, it's been busier than probably it's ever been as far as wintertime goes. Usually wintertime it's very, very slow, and it's very, very sporadic when you have shows or those kinds of things. But this year was, or so far this winter has been really surprising. Lots of shows for the most part, considering it's wintertime. Lots of newer. There's been a handful of newer venues that have opened up their doors to having live music, and also, like I said, my favorite thing to do, just from being a fan of music, there's been so many events to go to, and it's been awesome. So almost every weekend when I can, I've been going to see live music to some capacity, and it's all been pretty locally based things, and very, very cool. And my other thing that I love doing the most, which is probably equal, on equal ground to a degree is to go to the movies, and I haven't been to the movies in a while. The last movie I saw in the theater was the third Ant-Man movie, Quantumania, which I did a show on about my experience going to see. I did a show, I think it was like the day after I saw it. I usually do, whenever I go to the movies, I try to do a show either maybe right after I got out of the theater or definitely the day after. I usually love to do the shows more around the day after I've seen a movie in the theater, just because I have a little bit of time to think about it, process it, let it seep in. And, sometimes your opinion is very, very different from your initial reaction, you know, compared to, say, how you react right away or, say, within 24 hours or even maybe a week or two. I've had that experience where certain films that I saw, like, were right away. I was just like, in it to win it, really excited. And with friends or whatnot that I've gone to see the movie with, there's already like a discussion going on, and it's something I think about. And usually when that happens with a movie, it's it's usually a pretty good experience, like usually a really great experience, and I'm generally excited by that film. And then I've had other instances where I've seen a movie and I'm like, okay, that was pretty good, and then it will take a few days, and then suddenly I'll be like, wow, like that was really good, and it will click with me. And then other experiences I'll have of where I'll feel like my eyes are glazing over as I'm watching the film, and kind I have a hard time staying with it. Two examples of like how I've reacted to movies. When I saw Ty West's X in the theater, I was completely blown away by that movie. That was definitely the best newer horror movie that I've seen in 2022. Easily, there's a lot of good movies that came out, but that was definitely the best one. Just instantly loved it. I was sucked in. The friends I went with, we couldn't stop talking about it. Really exciting. And when I saw another movie that I saw, but I didn't actually see it in the theater, which I wish I did, and I had like a pretty good reaction, but then after a few days, I really was kind of enamored with the film. And I was really surprised that I had the reaction. And that movie was Maverick, Top Gun. I didn't get a chance to see it in the theater. Unfortunately, it would have been great to have seen that in the theater, but I was like, you know, not. I wasn't really super excited to see that. I thought it would be pretty good. I like the first one with Tom Cruise, and it's kind of a fun '80s movie. It's got some nostalgia tied to it, obviously. And when I saw Maverick, I heard it was really good from a lot of people, and I watched it at home on Blu-ray or DVD, and I liked it. I thought it was good. I thought it was pretty solid. That was my first reaction, and I was entertained. But then, like a day or two went by, and I kept thinking about it, and I was like, wow, like that movie was badass. Like I found myself enamored with the film, and I was really excited, and I was like, wow, like this wasn't a movie I thought I'd be so excited about. So that was an experience of that, of where like a few days go by, and then it starts seeping in, and then and I found myself thinking about it more and more. And then the last movie I actually saw in the theater was the new Ant-Man, and that was a movie. For a while watching it, I was into it. I was really enjoying it. But then there were a series of things that happened in the story, and things that happened that I felt, being a viewer, were kind of off-putting, and I checked out. And suddenly the movie felt incredibly long, and it dragged, and I just was really disappointed with that movie. But that was kind of pretty much my initial reaction to it, and it stayed with me. But then after a few days, I thought it was okay, but then after a few days, I really found myself really disappointed with that movie. So that was the last movie I saw in the theater. But today I'm going to go see a movie that I initially was kind of excited about, and I was like, I do want to see it. I do like the franchise, but I wasn't super primed to see it. But now I'm really excited to see it, and that is John Wick 4. Word on the street is that this movie, I've heard, and again, I don't know much about it. I've been trying to stay away, but there's a couple of guys that I watch on YouTube, and I've just watched these little excerpts of some of their reviews of the film. And from what I have gathered, and word on the street is that this movie is uh, basically an action masterpiece. Like I've heard that this is probably the best in the series. So, and I feel like it's definitely a movie visually and with the production side of things. Definitely a movie to definitely see in the theater and to experience it that way. But now I find myself really excited to see it, and I'm gonna go see that tonight. So I will be doing a show on it tomorrow morning. John Wick, I have a pretty good connection to the franchise. I think the first John Wick that came out in 2014, starring Keanu Reeves, I think that movie is just an amazing movie. I think it's one of the best action movies that's come out in the last 15 or 20 years. I think that movie is just incredible. Some of the greatest fight choreography. It's one of Keanu Reeves' best films. I mean, it's such a great film. It came out in 2014, and it was directed by Chad Stahelski, and just an incredible movie. I mean, just a fun ride. And but being a fan of old school martial arts films and really good fight choreography, I felt this movie had some of the greatest action that I'd ever seen. And it had this really cool, I don't know, almost like a graphic novel vibe. It had a real heightened reality to it. Visually, it was completely stunning. And again, the fight choreography was just breathtaking. A beautiful movie to look at. The whole universe, the whole world, the whole atmosphere was just incredible. The music was just incredible. And that movie, when I remember when I first saw it, I saw it after it came out of the theater. I didn't get a chance to see it in the theater, and I thought my expectations when I first saw John Wick were, kind of low. I thought it would be pretty good, but I wasn't super excited. And then I saw it. I rented it. I got it on DVD, and I was really blown away by it. I was just like, that movie is. I felt my reaction to it was this movie is an instant classic, like an instant masterpiece of action, and the violence and everything was just so satisfying and just a real primal movie. And I was just blown away by it. And there's two other John Wick. Shortly after that film came out, it was announced that this was going to be a full-on franchise. And the second one, I did see. I haven't seen any of the John Wick movies in the theater, but the second one I thought was pretty good. I didn't think it was quite as good as the first one, because I think the first one is just kind of an unparalleled movie in the world of action. It's just such a stellar movie and very satisfying. The second one was good, and I thought, the fight choreography was really great. I just didn't think it was quite. I don't. In some ways, I felt like it just didn't quite deliver the goods in some ways, and it just wasn't quite as exciting. But I did like it. I did really like it, and it is a movie I did recommend to people. And I've talked about, in passing with people, saying that it is worth seeing. And then when the third one came out, I was excited to see it, and I think that's an okay movie. I think it's probably the weakest movie in the franchise. as a franchise, like when I look at franchises or think of franchises, it's a tough thing sometimes. You know, when you have a franchise, a movie that kicks off a series of movies, and where you know, if you look at take a franchise for example, where there's a really long lasting, consistent thing that runs throughout all of those movies, it's pretty rare. I think it's pretty rare. I think it's kind of a hard thing to do. It's kind of a hard thing for the filmmakers to either keep things in line or to even raise that bar, especially usually when the first movie is so good and it sets the bar really high or it sets a precedent. So your reference point, if you're a fan of that film and then you're eager to see those characters again, your reference point is automatically going to be that first movie. So you're always going to be you'll be watching the newer films or the newer chapters of the film, but you'll always be thinking of that first one that lit that spark. And I think for being a filmmaker and directing a franchise, I think that is incredibly hard and incredibly challenging to keep that cohesive thing and to give the franchise and give the fans of that movie, you know, something good and something fresh, and then yet give them something new. It's a really tough thing to do. There's been a few examples of that where I think in franchises it's been really successful, but for the most part it's really tough. My favorite franchise that I've talked about is the Friday the 13th franchise. I did a big show on that and I talked about all the movies. And granted, that's a very different style of filmmaking and it's a very different genre. But, you know, again, at the end of the day, it's either good or it's bad, you know, or it moves you or it doesn't, you know, regardless of the style or the budget or whatever the hell it is. For me, I'm tied to that franchise. You know, it's in my blood, it's in my DNA. I grew up watching those films, but I still feel that those movies still really hold up and they're just entertaining as hell. And they're all like pretty good. They're all pretty consistent. And certain films in the series have grown on me even more. But I think they're all pretty good for what they are, you know, for the at face value. They're all like entertaining movies and they're all a little bit different, but yet each film pays homage to its predecessor in a pretty good way, and especially the first few that were really, really great. And it's exciting. I think it's an exciting franchise. One franchise I think that's not the case is the Alien franchise. I think obviously the first Alien, directed by Ridley Scott, is a unparalleled masterpiece. I think James Cameron's sequel to Aliens, is again an unparalleled masterpiece. Just a brilliant masterwork. One of the best movies in James Cameron's career, probably the best one. But again, it was one of those things where they gave you something new and fresh, but yet it was still paying homage to the original storyline, the original Alien that started the whole thing. And ever since then, there's been quite a few others. There was Alien 3 that came out, and then there was Alien Resurrection, and since then there's been Prometheus and also Covenant, and all of those movies are pretty bad. I think they're actually kind of terrible. They don't really stick with any kind of narrative of any of the predecessors, and that's one of the things that is really that really gets in the way for me with those films. And so I disregard really all the other movies. One movie I've come back to and I've tried giving it a chance more. I mean, well, before I talk about that, like for instance, Alien 3. I think that's a pretty cool movie in some ways, but it's also really bad. Not even in a cool way. Like, I like that movie because, like, I think visually and there's certain ideas around that in that film that are pretty interesting. The reason I do watch that film and I kind of do like it to a degree is because it's David Fincher's debut. And I'm a huge, huge David Fincher fan. So I, a lot of the times, will watch that just because this was his first, his debut. Huge fan of all of his work, and you can see like the beginnings of his style, being put on the big screen. But he had no control over that film. Fox Studios basically, drove him insane and drove him into the ground. So he didn't really have the vision that he wanted. But his imprint is very much on that film. So in some ways, I think it's worth checking out, especially if you're a David Fincher fan. But as a whole, not a very good movie. It's kind of a mess. And I think each movie progressively gets worse. The one movie that I've given it a chance, it has grown on me, and it's one of the newer ones, and that is Prometheus that came out. And this film, it was directed by Ridley Scott. He came back to the franchise, and when Prometheus came out, the whole story was that this was going to be a prequel to the whole Alien universe. That was going to take place before the original one, and it's kind of a cool movie. It's got some cool, interesting ideas. I like to a degree that it is very different, and it is, for the most part, original. But there are certain things around that film that just are completely incoherent and don't make any sense in the canon of Alien. And that's mainly because of the technology, I feel like, in Prometheus. Where the first one, directed by Ridley Scott, which came out in '79, is a real gritty movie. It's real. The technology is really kind of shoddy. Everything doesn't quite work, and it's all like really raw, and it's just got this dirtiness to it. But it's not super high tech because technology, it works, and it's advanced, but it's also kind of broken at the same time. And it's just got this rawness to it. Like Ridley Scott even said, like he set that movie out to be like truckers in space, and he was really influenced. The main influence for that movie for him was Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And you can see that. It has that rawness to it. And I feel like with Prometheus, even though it does explore and it does show some really interesting ideas where this whole thing kind of evolved from, like particularly around the xenomorph creatures who become the aliens. The technology in Prometheus is so incredibly over the top. Like the technology is so incredibly advanced. The way the ships, the capability of the spacecrafts in the movie, the general technology that the characters use in everyday existence is so high tech and so over the top. So to me, visually it's stunning and there's some really beautiful things in it. But to me, it doesn't make sense that the technology for the prequel is so much more advanced than by the time you get to Alien. Somehow or some way the technology has like gone by the wayside and it is not quite as advanced or efficient. It doesn't make any sense. And to me, that's the biggest thing around why I don't like Prometheus is that inconsistency, especially around the tech, because you have Prometheus where it's completely over the top and just incredible the capability of technology, what the technology can do. But then when you get to Alien, suddenly things are really gritty and they don't really always work and they're very limited. So it just takes you out of this. It doesn't make any sense. And, so I think one of the exceptions, like, say, as far as franchises go, where I actually feel like each movie gets better in each franchise, and that is the Purge movies. I'm a huge fan of the Purge movies. I think each movie actually gets better in the series. I love that. That's like my favorite modern day horror franchise, and pretty much my favorite franchise. In the modern times, and I consider that to be a horror franchise for the most part, even though it does have other elements. But that's a rare thing where I feel like every movie just gets better, and I loved the first Purge, the last movie that came out. Like that's a really awesome movie, and there's I think there's five or six movies in the franchise, and each movie actually gets better. It's pretty rare. The other franchise I think is actually really good and solid is the Saw franchise. I think it's a really great franchise. I haven't seen all of the movies, but I think each one is actually really good. I think it's pretty consistent. It sticks with the theme of the original one that kicked the whole thing off. So, but with the John Wick series or franchise, I think it's really good. I think the first one, like I said, is a masterpiece. I think the second one is pretty good. Third one, it's pretty mixed. I think what they did with the character around John Wick, where they kind of make him more. It feels like they made him more into like he's more impervious to pain, and he's kind of like becomes this like superhero character, and it's a little bit kind of absurd and ridiculous what he can survive in the third one, and he's not really vulnerable. Whereas in the first one, he's pretty vulnerable. So, and the second one, but they kind of make him and build him into more of like this like superhero character. So it doesn't seem like the stakes are high or that as high, or he's never really in a high degree of danger as a character because he's still human. But in the third one, he feels like he is literally a superhero character. So the tone of the film isn't as good. Again, visually, the action, there's some really incredible things in it. It's worth seeing overall. But as a whole, the franchise, it's okay. But the first one, I think, is just bananas, just amazing. And from what I've heard, that this fourth one supposedly might be the best in the franchise. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. I'm very, very excited to see it, but I'm also kind of skeptical. But I'm very, very excited. I went from being interested in seeing it to being finding myself really excited to see it. So stay tuned for a show on John Wick Chapter 4 tomorrow. So we will see you then. Have a great day. Peace.